All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call this Rules Committee meeting to order. I lied. Let's go ahead and do introductions.
Crystal Kennedy, Mace Alex Hall.
Pete Peterson. Christopher Garner. Is this my copy?
Suzanne LeGrand.
Felix Rivera.
Cameron Bradford.
All right. So I'm going to start at the top of the agenda. And actually, before I get started with the chair's report, Derek is here from KTU to do a story on sanctioned camps. We have that. I don't think it's written on our agenda. It was sort of a last-minute addition. But we do have that under other items. I think we are waiting for Mr. Weddleton to get back, so when he does, we're probably just going to reorder.
It's D. It did get added.
Oh, look at that. Thank you. So we will reorder things when Mr. Weddleton gets back to take up that item, because I know that Derek's on a schedule here. So let's go ahead and start with the report from the chair. So first is, actually I did need this first, if we can get the light. All right. So I want to do just a quick report on the 2020 census. So first, a big thank you to Suzanne for running the meeting while I was gone, doing other business. I heard that you did a fantastic job.
Thanks, Felix. A huge thank you to the clerk's office. They're incredible.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So want to share a couple of resources and let everyone know that the Complete Counts Commission at their meeting yesterday, they passed a resolution that's going to be coming to the Assembly and to the Mayor requesting the assistance, non-monetary at this point, on outreach. So they have a bullet point of like 15 or so different things they think that we can do to help with outreach for the census. Things like adding something in the utility bill saying, hey, the census is coming up. Adding for when folks go to the library and they use the computers, sort of the first thing that you see is information on the census when you log in. So they're going to have a variety of different suggestions. I want to walk folks through two resources really quick on the census. So first is Alaska Counts. No, this doesn't look right. Can we get this looking right?
Oh. Is it right? Can you? Oh, is she still here?
Can you be?
Yes.
I can do it small, I guess. So I have it on small screen, but when I do full screen, it doesn't show up right.
Because the projector size is correct. This is how everything
Yay, okay. Then I'll go ahead and just do it small screen. All right, make it work. So Alaska Counts is a statewide organization. There are a variety of groups that are part of it. And look, see, even they're great. Trying to get people to get jobs with the census. $28 an hour, it's a good job. These groups right here that you see, they're all involved in Alaska Counts. And they are providing a lot of technical assistance for the Complete Counts Commission in Anchorage. And the main resource that I want to show here, it's under resources, and want to advocate for everyone to get involved in this process, which is sharing information about the count. So they have fact sheets as well as social media toolkits that you can use, so you can pull stuff for social media. A lot of it's Alaska-based, so they did a good job with that. And then they have some videos as well, and testimonials. I didn't know that they got Senator Sullivan in there. Good for him. A lot of great things here. So, and videos here. So if folks want to share those on their social media, I would highly encourage it. Then the census itself also has a lot of information for elected officials that can be shared. I want to go to one other page. So, hágase contar, it is a page specific for resources and tailored to helping out folks in the different Latinx communities understand why they should take the census and some of the fears that are pervasive within those communities. So that's another resource that I wanted to share. Part of the work that they are doing, I don't know exactly where it is, but they also have a program that's called Hazme Contar, which is a program specifically for schools. And I hope this is the right page. I'm not taking this on my other page. I don't think so. Well, I guess, yeah, this looks like it's a school board that's has some of that information from Hazme Contar on it. So they have a lot of information that I'm going to share with our school board members on what they can do to help us out. Because one of the lowest, hardest to count populations is that 0 to 5 age range. So that's just some basic information. I'll share more probably via email. Next, for Chair's report, I want to talk about our something new, something exciting. So Suzanne and I and Barbara and Desiree have been working for some months now to figure out ways, and this is something that several Assembly members have approached us about and we've wanted to do for a long time, of us having our own individual office spaces. That's something, especially as we start to become busier and busier, and start to really evolve in our positions, I think is going to be critical and important. So starting in December, yes, is when it officially starts? No, construction starts in December. Yeah, so December we'll be starting construction and reconfiguring the Ombudsman suite so that we can have more office space there. The way it's going to look like, just the basics of it, is there's going to be 10 offices in the Ombudsman suite, and the Ombudsman's still going to have their own offices. And then we're working on getting 2 office spaces in Eagle River, and that's something that Desiree is working on. So again, construction to begin sometime in December, with the offices being available in January. For folks who are curious, the funds are coming from the operating budget for this year. So this isn't something that we're putting into next year's budget. Couple other updates for Chair's report. So first, state legislative program. So don't forget that next month we're going to be discussing items to add to our legislative program. So if committees want to talk about it in their own committees, do that this upcoming month. And then the end of October, we will talk about the things that we want to add to the state legislative program. Other side of that coin, budget. So the budget memo we gave to the administration end of July. Next week, Suzanne and I are going to be meeting with the administration to review their official response to the memo and the proposed budget priorities that we sent to them. And I'll inform everyone after that meeting of the outcome and what got put in, what didn't get put in, and rationales. That is it that I have for the Chair's report. Is there anything that members have asked me to do that I maybe have forgotten, or additional things that members think leadership should consider? Yeah.
I have a question actually about the census, if I can.
Uh-huh.
Has there been any discussion about making sure that the language around the census refers to residents, counting all residents versus citizens?
So that is an important piece, and it's actually, the city right now is working on a Know Your Census Rights pamphlet, and so in that, one of the questions is going to be, does everyone have to take the census? And in it, it's going to say yes. Citizens, immigrants, refugees, everyone needs to take the census.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah, Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's important to emphasize, if you are in a position to talk to a citizen about this, that our funding federally, a lot of it is based on population.
Right.
So if we have an undercount, we get less federal funding, which means the municipality has to make up for that funding in one way or another and tax them more.
Right.
And so if they're anti-tax, like most of them are, then they'll go, oh wow, can you count me twice?
I don't think that's legally how it works, Pete, but yes, that is actually one of the strong points that we have here. And it's one of the messaging frameworks that they really pushed on us at the summit that I went to in LA, which is everyone has 1,001 issues that they care about already, and we don't need to add an 1,002nd issue. So rather, we need to connect the dots for people if they care about education, that the census is a critical part to funding education. If they care about our roads, if they care about any of these issues, or if they simply care about not getting taxed more, that they need to be counted in the census. Okay, any other general chair questions? Yeah, Crystal.
Just in regard to the offices, what, can you just explain a little bit more about what the expectation is, what that's really for, and especially like having a separate Eagle River one?
Yeah, so in regards to the offices, this has been something, right now we have sort of 2 offices, and really not 2, because one's sort of Forrest's office, and he has his stuff all over the office. And then the other office is the office that I primarily use, and I try to keep that one tidy so other people can use it too. So generally, folks, when they want to have constituent meetings or whatever, they will do them all around town at coffee shops and etc. And that's a good thing, but this provides another alternative to having those type of one-on-one constituent meetings, or having a place where you can put all of your giant binders. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that faces this problem, but I don't have space at home for all of the binders and all of the materials that I get. And so having that type of space is really important. And just generally, as we transition to, I think, just having more on our plate and focusing on so many different areas, having that centralized working space where I know that I can go and focus on my municipal work and have that sort of separation between that and home is important for me. So that's been a request that several assembly members, and some of them aren't here right now, have asked us about.
Okay,
Yeah.
well then, would you be open then to Fred and I discussing that as to whether or not we really have that need, not Eagle River, before you go spending any kind of construction money or
Totally.
rental? Because I don't think either one of us has expressed that interest, but anyway.
Okay, sure. So
Go down that path.
I'm happy to have that conversation with you, and that'd be sort of Desiree and I can have that conversation with you.
Okay.
Yeah. Chris?
I would add to that one of the reasons is not just because we need space for stuff and for meetings, but there's a separation of powers issue here, that we have a very high imbalance of power in our city. There is no place that is ours in this whole city government. We're itinerant. We come, we try to find a space, and the public might not consciously see that, but that's the net message that we send to the world. And so this is an important part, I believe, in establishing co-equal status, that we actually have a place other than the clerk's office who coordinates everything for us, and hiding in a corner of the ombudsman's office. So I think it's a super high value. You don't need it, great, different conversation, but as a whole, we need to be showing the public we're here, we have a place.
Absolutely. Thank you. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't tell you how many times people have said, well, let's meet at your office and we'll discuss this. And I have to tell them I don't have an office, and they're just dumbfounded. It's silence at the end of the line. Excuse me? They just don't believe that we could be on the assembly and not have an office. And when we had the earthquake last November, it probably took me 45 minutes to pick up all the stuff that shook off my tables where I stack my stuff and try to sort it back out. And I end up having to recycle about a box full of stuff every month. Otherwise, it's just too high. So I understand. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other questions before we move on? Okay, so then, all right, so John's still not here. Did he respond to me? Oh, he did. All right, so John said he'd be back at 1:15. So Derek, that's when we'll have that discussion. All right, so then let's move on to the second item, which is assembly member discussion on pending business. So this is our normal round table on what's going on in your world, what are you working on, what do you want to collaborate on with other members. Do you want to start on this side, Cameron?
That would be really easy,
Okay, cool.
because I'm going to pass on that. So.
Got it. All right. Bam. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. So a follow-up item actually from our joint meeting with the school district. I'm working on a resolution to address some of the traffic issues and identify how we're going to work on this from a policy standpoint. I know, Chris, you had made a couple helpful suggestions on that at the meeting. So I'll get a draft out before it's introduced and ask Ms. Jones to send that. And I think also, well, actually, e-cigarettes. Mr. Constant and I are working on the issue of taxing. But I would like to put forward a consideration of, in light of everything that's happening, banning flavors. And I know actually at the same time, the federal government is looking at that as well. But even perhaps with some language at the local level about anything that's not approved by the FDA being banned. And I don't know how long it'll take at the federal level or if anyone at the state is working anything. I know Lisa Murkowski had something, but I feel like we need to move this conversation forward given what's happening nationally.
The 4 states have banned it so far.
Yeah, Meg.
I just want to put this out for consideration as you look at that. If you say anything the FDA hasn't banned, the FDA being a federal agency would obviously approved, but whatever, wouldn't have approved marijuana because marijuana is in contrast to federal law. So I just want to toss that out as a consideration to be prepared to address one way or the other.
And I meant, in the context of e-cigarettes.
Just e-cigarettes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Flavors. And
Okay.
I don't know what the FDA has approved concerning e-cigarettes at all.
Okay.
But definitely like the flavors piece. So,
Anything else, Suzanne?
For now, that's it.
Okay,
Thanks.
cool. Chris?
So I have nothing new that I've started in the last month, but there is a project that Mr. Bresbury and Forrest and I are working on that we briefly discussed the conversation with the Native Village of Eklutna, and that is moving forward in draft phase, and I'm waiting for one more person to give me a thumbs up before I share preliminary materials with the tribe. And that conversation will probably start moving forward in the next month. This month it begins in a couple days. Otherwise, we've been having conversations about possible changes to electoral eligibility, and I don't know where that stands at this point. I think it's shake the magic 8-ball and it says prospects are hazy or something like that. And
Sorry, can you
otherwise,
describe what you mean by that?
we don't know. I don't know yet. There are some legal questions. If it's anyhow, I'm not ready to put it on the table yet.
Sure.
So just
Okay.
hazy. I don't know if it's a path that's open or not yet.
oh, reference.
Magic 8-ball. Magic 8-ball. Let's keep that really clear. So
Magic.
I didn't know you were a pool player.
no, it's a little fortune
I
teller.
got 2 fingers.
Fortune teller. Anyhow, so I don't know. That's my report.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Ethics and Election Committee has got a subcommittee that's been working on adjustments to Title 28, and that's ongoing. And I don't see any members here today that are on that subcommittee, but it's in the works. And if Barbara can talk about it a little bit if she wants to, but we probably have a lot of stuff on our plate. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that we're working on that.
Thanks, Pete. Megan?
I'm working on a variety of issues around homelessness. This seems to be what's on my plate right now. But also, anyone who's interested in maybe working and advocating for a fall cleanup, we have the spring cleanup that's very popular. I think a fall, like early October cleanup is a great idea to kind of get ourselves squared away for the winter, especially since the weather's been kind of holding nicer longer. And I would propose that that effort also maybe be named after our illustrious Parks Director, John Rada. So if anyone's interested in working with me on that and working with, I think it's the Chamber and stuff to advocate for such a thing, please let me know, because I think that would be a great community engagement before we, outdoors, before we kind of shut down for the winter. That's it.
Thanks, Meg. Crystal?
Thank you. Just tag on to Meg's idea, that is a great idea in terms of fall cleanup, and I'm a member of the Order Area Rotary Club, and we do one on our own. So to name it though, something in honor of John Rada would be really popular in my neck of the woods. So the only thing I'm really working on right now is going to be some amendments to the plastic bag ban, and I'm doing that in conjunction with Chris and Meg, and so don't anybody else talk to us about it. So anyway, that's it.
Thanks. We won't. Sure, Suzanne.
So, to those of you working on those amendments, since we've received a number of emails requesting reconsideration of certain areas, like booking use of plastic bags not just for restaurants, but for clothing, I mean, what all are you addressing?
In the ordinance as proposed, it didn't allow for plastic bags at restaurants. Plastic bags could already be used at restaurants if they were to prevent spills, right? Things of that nature. It's just the carry-out bags,
Right.
paper. And what we're doing, at least in the introduced format, and I know once you introduce it, it's no longer your thing, it becomes the groups. The proposal was to, not require that retailers give out bags, because the way that the original language was written, it said you shall give out an alternative bag. And so change that to may, because it's kind of crazy to tell Costco to never give a bag out. You must give out a bag. And then the other piece is that for restaurants and for markets, temporary markets and operators that are kind of less formal, that you aren't required to charge a fee for the bag. Because what that turned into right away was just, at McDonald's, say, an addition of 10 cents per bag that they could charge for no different service, right? And so it was irrational. It didn't achieve the goal of moving them to plastic to already paper, and it just was profit. So that's where we're looking at. But the item will go where it goes on deliberation.
And to Chris, Crystal and I, separate from Chris, are looking at just making the fee optional completely, leave it up to the retailers if they want to eat the cost or pass it along, which is what the fee ultimately happens. That right now it says shall charge, but there are lots of retailers who have contacted us that say, I never charged before, and now I'm being forced to charge a fee, which is, and I understand some of the original rationale, but yeah, we can put it up for debate and talk about it.
Okay.
And then, can I add on that to that too then? And I also want to look at, I just kind of want to go a step further and look at how narrowly we've defined the alternative bag, because we have lots of people who have purchased what would be considered reusable bags, but they are actually made of plastic. So according to the ordinance, they cannot use them. So
That's not what the ordinance says.
yes, it does.
It actually doesn't.
I've read it so many times in terms of what, and this is the way the people are interpreting them. So
That's true.
yeah. So if it's not woven, it's not considered an alternative bag. So that's where part of the problem lies. So
Thanks.
Can I just do a quick follow-up?
Sure.
So if I get questions, I will continue to respond, but I will also send them, suggest they contact the three of you.
Well,
Since you're working on.
what I've been telling everyone is you can email us individually, but send your email to plasticbagban@anchorajk.gov. Make sure it goes there, because that's the clearinghouse, the solitary unified place where we're asking
Okay.
comments to drive, and then those will be tabulated, organized, thoughtfully kind of categorized.
That's plastic bag ban at
AnchorageAK.gov.
And then just the second half of the follow-up would be, Mr. Chair, can we please have work sessions when we get to that point? Because I feel like the public has expressed to us a number of times that they don't want us to be really focused on this discussion at our Tuesday meeting. So, I mean, whatever we can work out.
I think that's just a red herring from the community, because we didn't spend an extraordinary amount of time working on plastic bags. But yes, I think
like it.
We did in advance. We had 4 work sessions, we had 2 public hearings. We had so much work that went into the ban. So anyone who says it just happened without them knowing was studiously aloof.
right. But yes, we will have work sessions, absolutely,
At least one.
and at least one, and we'll see what the debate looks like on Tuesday. I mean, I can't even control what the debate looks like. It's up to everyone.
But there's also the factor that the agenda was so packed last time that we have a ton of items in advance of when we even get to the beginning of the new agenda. And so who knows if we'll even get to it by virtue of the packed calendar.
Crystal.
And I think just in line with the conversation about the public not knowing, the ban was actually passed last year. And then there was kind of that lull where I think people were under the impression that, oh, it just didn't get implemented, it didn't pass. And they didn't understand there was kind of a period by which it was going to be implemented later to give retailers an opportunity to adjust or whatever they needed to do to get ready for that. So I think it did surprise a lot of people because they just kind of thought it went away.
Well, and we extended the date for the implementation to give retailers a chance to get rid of some of their bags. And so I think it was not at the top of people's mind because they thought, oh, that must not have passed, but it didn't happen. And then when it did happen, they go, oh, when did they pass this?
Yeah.
But additional comment about the McDonald's restaurants that I never go to. I had a constituent call me the other day and was very, very upset because he goes in and eats, and he used to always get a tray, and now he gets a bag that he gets charged 10 cents for, and he was through the roof. I mean, I was having to calm the guy down on the phone over dime, and so he's going, yeah, I think they're making X $1,000 a year per store, you know. And so yeah, I think we need some adjustments made. Thank you.
And
Thank you.
if I might, that's the shall piece, right?
Yeah.
That's the shall piece that we actually did that. So.
Yeah. All right. Let's go
Cameron.
ahead and move. Oh, yeah.
Cameron was.
Well, I just wanted to clarify something, and that's what I'm hearing you say. So, and I should go back and read it. So right now, the interpretation is that every store must offer a paper bag and must charge 10 cents for that paper bag.
Yep.
That is a requirement that they.
It's a way to read that
And
language.
that 10 cents goes back to them.
Yes.
Right, but they must charge it and they must offer it. Is that right?
Yeah.
And documented on their receipt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for now,
Okay. Great. Yeah.
I was just going to state that there's about 3 of you that are working on this, and some of it's come to the Department of Law. I'm sure as Dean comes back, some will go to him, is how to organize a point of contact on this, so you're not all duplicative.
Yeah,
Sure.
and I agree with that because the mayor's office is absolutely working on it as well, in conversations with Jason. So that's a good point, and I don't know exactly how we want to kind of move forward in that direction, but obviously it would be better to be more efficient in this process.
And I offered that Quincy was the one who drafted the change. I don't know if that's something she wants to be involved with. It was just because she was there on the day when it had to be done.
She was there on the day.
Right, and so it's
And I was doing other things.
luck of the draw. I know you were doing this to me. when I
Out of the Department of Law.
Not you. So it is actually wise for us to pick a point person for proposed amendments. Indeed, you're the person who we would turn to for that.
Ira's been handling it.
Well, but Ira's not a legal drafter. She's talking about the legal.
No, I mean for the ideas themselves. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, definitely that's Ira. It's
Okay, so you
it's
have that
plastic
that
bag
you
ban
can-
at anchorajk.org, but I think also we need someone on your team who we can kind of funnel everything to.
Actually, Chris, do you have something to add on to this?
I was just going to, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I was just going to add what Mr. Constant pointed out is that there's somebody there's actually multiple people, both in solid waste and in the mayor's office that are working on it. If you want a point for community input, feedback, etc., Ira's good, or we just hired a new recycling coordinator / sustainability coordinator, Pierce Schwal, who works for Shannon Solid Waste Services. So we've got options. If you want to send stuff, send community input through one of those people, that's there for you.
Yeah, Crystal.
And I know that Ira's been the one that's been handling the questions with the public, that all the questions coming from emails or whatever are going to him, and he's actually putting together kind of a list, kind of trying to categorize all the specific questions and giving that to the mayor's office. So anyway, I don't know whoever is kind of at the top of their game on this particular item right now would probably be the one that we should probably go ahead and go with.
And if I might, Ira's been fielding every call,
Yes.
all of the outreach, all the input. He's been coordinating with me to the legal department. So it wouldn't make sense to divert from that process at this time, except to find whoever is the right person on the actual drafting end, who will make sure we're not being duplicative in the actual amendment process.
And Ira does send his questions down to the Department of Law. And I actually think Becky, when she's done with RCA's likes this area of law, would like to take it back over again.
Okay.
All right.
Whenever that is.
We'll be done with this Bagman conversation before
Before
that.
that, so we've
Yes.
selected Ira, is that
All right.
good?
So before we move on, plastic bag ban. Anything else on that?
So we decided
Okay.
on Ira then? Is that what
I think
you're
so.
saying? Okay,
Yeah.
all right, just
Yep.
to make sure. Thank
So
you.
we're gonna send everything to Ira. All right. So, moving on in our agenda, update from committees on upcoming business. We'll go ahead and start on this side.
Oh, you would start over here. Okay, so for community and economic development, wow. I know we've got, our next meeting, we've got a slew of marijuana licenses, just normal business, but we've got, where'd Chris go? I was gonna say, we've got something coming up that they wanted to present, and I don't know, maybe we're gonna talk more. Probably wouldn't be doing that because we'd be going backwards. I was gonna say the building fees. So anyway, I'm not much help on that right now, sorry.
Okay, no problem. Meg.
Thanks. The only thing I have on the committee from on homelessness was something that came out of the conversation about the current Dean's contract is that the administration is comfortable with us putting in July or August on our agenda a conversation about emergency shelter for the winter, so that we can get in front of it in the summer before it's cold. So we'll update there. That's all I have specifically.
Okay. Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, if anyone has ideas of legislation they want to advocate for, send that to the legislative committee, and at some point in time, if we get enough items, we'll have a meeting and start working on that.
Great.
Because the legislative session is, 4 months away.
Yeah, it's around the corner. And then anything on public safety?
We've got a meeting next week. We're having a couple presentations. One on, I believe it's white collar crime, and the other one is on indigenous people, violence against them. So, and I don't think those are subjects that we've actually touched on before. So it's something new.
Yeah, should be good discussions. Chris?
Thank you. So just from my half of the Utility and Enterprise Oversight Committee, I know that we will be having the final review the final draft is on from the Ascent report. They've asked for comments on the report, if you've been reading it, to be sent to them by the 4th for incorporation into the final draft. And we've been in
What was that
discussions.
again? Sorry.
October the 4th, comments on the draft report. I mean, if they come a little bit later, it's fine, we're members, but they've asked for the user groups, administration, et cetera, to send their comments over. This is not a formal, public review draft process and a final draft. This is their report, but they're giving us an opportunity for input. And so, but again, we are meeting separately with them to kind of have a highline conversation about what they would see as our role to implement certain elements. And then I heard just in conversations with our friends over at AWWU that we should anticipate seeing and being asked for a work session, Mr. Chair, on the contract award for the contractor that would be proposed to do the master planning process, that we just awarded the funding, kind of figured that whole piece out in advance of the meeting on the 8th, so that that can get rolling. And so just stay tuned for that outreach from them, because what I asked them for was a timeline for their public outreach for the master planning process, because I heard from many people in the public that this was all done in the dark and nobody knows, but there hasn't been an opportunity. This whole process was to set up a master planning outreach process. So they said they would get me a timeline, but they also had an issue relating to the contract award for that work that would be approved.
Gotcha.
So those are the things I have from the committee.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. So we had canceled our regularly scheduled September Health Policy Committee meeting. We had a joint one with Public Safety. And my assumption for the October agenda is we'll carry over what we had planned for September, which was a continued discussion on vaccinations vis-a-vis childcare licensing and how there are some gaps in code there. We also have a possible discussion. I can't remember if we were going to do this in the Health Policy Committee on the people count report.
Mhm.
We are. Okay.
Yeah, I think we
so
have
that,
to still do
okay.
that.
I don't know if we're going to try to put that on October 8th. We think we would need a whole hour, but we can have some discussion. Maybe we want to take that up first
Mhm.
before the vaccinations. I don't have anything to add on the Utility Commission. Just trying to breathe a little bit after that prolonged SWU discussion that is that still continues in earnest in District 6.
We still
That's
haven't
what it
decided,
is.
is it a SWU or an SWU?
No, I'm pushing for SWU.
That's the law. That's why we haven't resolved all these issues.
Well,
I don't know.
and I mean, we still do
It's like
have
Johnny Cash song.
an AO
Children
that
need
Two items.
that will be returning back to, two. Okay, two for now. We'll be
Yeah.
returning
So,
back to.
not done yet. Thank you. Cameron?
No, I don't think I have anything more. Certainly just to add on to what Meg said about the allocation of the contract with Beans, and looking forward to that conversation on the 4th, and I guess this seems like the only meeting to say this, but again, as a relatively new member of the Assembly, still struggling with the understanding of when the development of these kinds of things come into place, right? What role does the Assembly have when ultimately we're tasked with approving them? And so the process of looking at emergency shelter options, I'm assuming that the administration went through a process of looking at locations and potential partners and all of this work that I wasn't aware of at all. So that all of that work, and then bringing something forward like that without very much information. So I'm saying this in this meeting because it's really the only one to say it in, is that whether it's this issue or another one, still struggling with what our role is and what level of communication should we be asking for, so that when we're ultimately asked to make a decision and to allocate funds or whatever, we're involved in that. But also as people that are out in the community, trying to convene, trying to connect people, trying to sort of create more of a better communication, better collaboration between all of these different partners. That work is happening within the administration as well, and we're not communicating about it. And so I just like to have an opportunity at some point to be able to improve both that communication leading to a decision, and also all of that sort of community-based work that's around trying to improve communication, collaboration, and the efficiency of our work whatever topic it is, whether it's homelessness or anything else. So,
yeah, I can talk about that, and then I have two folks in the queue about that. So I can tell you from, not specifically on the Beans contract per se, but generally, that I believe we should communicate with the administration as early as possible in the process. I think that is an appropriate role for us to have. And I can say that I have asked, and it'll be a regular topic now when I meet with the administration, and I asked it for the first time this last meeting, is there any big things coming up that the Assembly should be aware of? And I'll continue to ask that of the administration. Are there any big things that we need to be aware of so that we can build that type of process in, so that we can consider it on our ends? I can make sure that the co-chairs are tied into whatever is happening, because frankly, I think that is how we should do it, right? The co-chairs should be in the loop and talking with the administration when these things come forward. I'll also say that I'm working with Barbara, and she has 100 different things that I've asked her to do, but working with Barbara to develop some type of checklists for ordinances that come forward, and have we done certain things? And one of those is, have we talked to the community partners about this proposed idea? Because I think it's really critical for us to make sure that we have taken all of these diligent steps in advance of something coming before the Assembly. Because otherwise, we're just postponing it because we don't know about all these different things that have happened or not.
Or not being able to postpone it because there's a deadline, and if you don't, people are going to freeze to death, right? That's the craziest thing. Like, how did this get to us with 3 days before people are going to start dying, and now it's our fault, right? That was the weirdest part of the conversation going forward. Is like, I've literally had people say to me, people died. Excuse me? So that is just, whether it gets delayed, punt, or it just gets hammered through without the proper due diligence. That's what we have to figure out how not to have happen.
Absolutely. No. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Through the chair to Mr. Perez-Verdia's point and to Mr. Constant's point, I don't disagree that more communication is. Oh, by the way, on around the sheet.
No.
I don't disagree that more communication is good, and I will say that the Beans contract in particular, we communicated with leadership on Friday that we expected that item to be pulled and postponed so that conversation was able to happen so that everybody could understand. I don't think that that message made it to every single member, and I'm assuming that based on the reaction, I don't think it made its way to either of the co-chairs. And I think one of the things that we have set up now is a monthly meeting with the co-chairs and Jasmine and Nancy and I and some other people, so that this is not something that happens again. I understand Mr. Constant's point about the timeline of all of these things, but you all know the circumstances that we've been working through over the last few months, and I think that some of the information that you will hear on Friday during the work session and that some of you members are already aware of explains all of the questions that are part of the curiosity behind the contract. So I would also say that the existing assembly and administrative process allows for items to be introduced, work sessions to be scheduled, and then votes to be held. And that is how it has worked. And I think that if there's anything that the assembly would like to do outside of that process, then we're absolutely willing to have that conversation.
I don't believe there's been any poor practice on behalf of any of the parties. I think reality has a way of driving these timelines, and it just gets very difficult to make decisions with impartial information that we all have in our hands. And so I think that we need as much flexibility in the process as we can have. Just some of these difficult decisions, we have to dig deep.
You said the word difficult.
Yeah.
That means it's difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So.
We were in the queue.
Oh yes, Meg, go ahead.
Thanks. One thing I was wondering if we could maybe add to your checklist is the question, does the ordinance or whatever need to have a committee referral as soon as we know? And second, I asked some questions of council about what's our role in sole source contracts in particular. I got some information. I've actually forwarded it on to Austin, Felix, and Barbara to ask if we could maybe do a training about that, because as a new member, I was very confused about what we could ask for, couldn't ask for, what role we are to play in that, and I think that's an education piece. I mean, maybe the more senior members all know and don't need the refresher, but I certainly needed that information, because I don't want to overstep, with regard to separation of powers, but I feel, I felt really placed in a very tough position Tuesday night, and I've been trying, I've just taken the brunt of that to fully vet our position. I have had those comments, like Chris has mentioned, and it's upsetting. So however we can do it better, it would be really great. Excuse me.
Crystal.
Well, I appreciate Meg's comment in that, and I understand her frustration, and I'm sorry that she had to deal with any kind of really bad comment in that. But I will say, I think that's one of the things that leaves me questioning. Again, it's the role and responsibility, and I know, and Cameron, you started off the whole conversation, and that's always been my question: is to what extent on the left, but to what extent is even this whole concept of homelessness and trying to fix it the municipality's responsibility? And I will say that, having heard the news of the $40 million that the various nonprofits are going to put toward this issue, I think is a great thing. But at the same time, I had people saying, oh, you've got $40 million to spend now, what are you going to do with it? And I thought, that's really not the municipality's decision. I mean, we might be part of that conversation, but again, it goes back to begging the question, to what extent is the municipality responsible, and how far does our role really go? And I don't have a good answer for that. And I've felt for Cameron and Meg both many times trying to get a handle on this, in terms of there's so many different people that do what they do, and and praise God that they do. But the point is, who's got the ultimate responsibility, and who's going to make the decisions? Who's got the big picture? And that's just very frustrating. It goes back to the idea of we get caught kind of unaware sometimes making decisions that we're really not sure how it plays into what our responsibility is. So, if anybody can, put a flow chart on the board for me or something like that. But I'm really having a hard time absolutely understanding this, and it is such a volatile issue. It's very emotional, and we ought to be able to explain to people, this is our role. This is how we will play a part. We won't do this, we won't do that, we will do whatever X, Y, Z is. So I would definitely appreciate some guidance, either where maybe it's a legal paper that says, you know what, we have this that we must do, or this that we can't do. But again, it just comes down to trying to figure out who's in charge. So.
Thank you.
I just want to add one more.
Sure.
And they're not here right now, but I will just, and I'll speak for myself in saying that I work from a place of trusting the administration. I work from a place of knowing that this is their full-time job. They're all professionals. They're incredibly good at what they do. I don't want to do their job. And so that's where this role piece is tough, because I don't ever want to be in a position where they think I'm overstepping or I'm trying to get involved in this kind of work. I want to be in a policy-making role. I want to be in a sort of a 10,000-foot governance kind of role. That's my understanding of this. So that's what's challenging is that there's a culture in this assembly, which I like, in that we're the first line of contact. People contact us first to get something done, right? And so this role piece is very, very challenging, and I don't think there's an easy answer to it. But I think the key is that I'm not doubting the administration's ability to do their work. I just want to figure out how I can add value to it and do my due diligence. So when I'm asked to approve a contract, for a certain amount of money, my job is to make sure that it's appropriate, right? It's being spent in an appropriate way. And so being able to figure out why is it happening so late, and what other options were thought of, and why is it a sole source, and what, so these are very normal questions for us to ask that I feel like very much in our lane. Anyway, I do think that just in service of trying to maintain a really positive relationship with the administration, it's important that I think that they understand that this is not meant to be an overstep. This is meant to sort of try to figure out how I can play my part.
Thank you. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, Pete, and then I'll adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, there is a segment of the population out there that has, contacted me and other members, I'm sure, and their question is, why haven't you already solved this problem? Like, they expect us to have the solution. And my question is, have you been to Seattle? Have you seen the problems that they have there compared to what we have? We've been working on this problem, and it's not. It may not be solved, but it's not getting worse. Most of the other cities on the West Coast that I'm aware of, their homeless population is growing by leaps and bounds, and ours has been staying approximately the same, if not going down a little bit. And so, like Cameron was saying, we provide a leadership role here. And so now that we have the private sector stepping up with what I consider an amazing 5-year commitment of $40 million, we just have to make sure that that money is spent in the most appropriate way, so that we can actually start lowering those numbers and get some help for some of these people that have been on the street for a long time and are in a position where they feel like they have nowhere else to go. And it's not an easy role to be in. You have to have pretty thick skin sometimes, but we're the ones that chose to take this job, and so we just got to keep moving forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, so just briefly on that, the $40 million, we actually don't have a lick of say in how that's spent. And that's actually good, right? That's good. And I think what Mr. Presbyterian Cameron's been saying all along, what we need is a stronger coalition that takes leadership for coalition-driven efforts. This is the actual fuel that will make that reality, this $40 million. Now, we'll be at the table because we are an inherent part in the coalition's plan. I think it's plank 3. We are the public safety and health plank. And we will never be free of our duty to provide for the public health and the public safety. And so when you think about honing in on what our actual ultimate duties are, right there is the nexus. And so anything outside of that, it's a conversation we can have. We can try to insert ourselves, we can invite ourselves, we can do things that are our own outside of the coalition's plan. But ultimately, the coalition plan that we have helped to foster and adopt, we have one place in that. Then there are several other groups that are involved. There's policy level groups, there's funder groups. The funder group is the one who has come together and said, $8 million a year for the next 5 years, let's see what we can do. And that doesn't give us relief from our duty to fund the public health and public safety planks, which are ASP, which are the funds that we're now giving to the shelter, which are any kind of support we need to ensure holes are filled in that public safety side. And so this conversation is one that's emerging. It's very interesting. And as much as we can be a player at the table, we should be there because we do have an important role in those two planks and also communicating, because people come to us first, what's happening? Something's happening, good things are happening. So I would just offer, we have not a lick of say in how that $40 million gets spent, except insofar as we've been invited to the table and we talk. So we have to be careful about that. And this is great. This is the first time the community has stood up to say, we're going to lead ourselves. We need to support that.
And we can encourage it.
Yeah, we need to support that.
Thanks. Crystal?
Well, I absolutely appreciate that because that was I'm sorry, PA, didn't like your statement about the fact that it was our responsibility to make sure that $40 million is appropriately spent, because I don't believe that's true. And that's kind of where I'm trying to get clarification. And I appreciate what you said, Chris, the idea of letting this coalition really take the lead. And absolutely. absolutely, the municipality and certainly the assembly, because of that, has a role, and I do think that is a whole lot more public safety oriented. You know, it's making sure that police and fire respond appropriately when they need to. It's about dealing with the health department and issues there, and they certainly overlap. But my perspective on all this is that this is very much an entire community issue. And, you know, I've even been taking people to task, you know, that I know will hand out $20 bills on the street corner because, or the woman that said on TV the other day, oh, we need tarps and sleeping bags. And I thought, you know what, there's an enabling here that doesn't need to happen. But at the same time, the goodness of people's hearts need to be directed in the right way. So my question is, who's going to do that? You know, who's really taking the ultimate lead in that? And we'll play our part, and we should, but it's still that question about really what our role is. So if the coalition manages to, I guess, for this particular $40 million, they are hiring some kind of coordinator, somebody to really look at the whole picture and then begin to figure out how this $40 million gets spent. And I appreciate that. So if we're going to have a so-called homelessness guru, then maybe our message needs to be, you know, this is kind of the person in charge. We'll deal with fire, police as best we can. But anyway, that's what I'm looking at. Is I'm looking at exactly what my role is as an assembly member and how it all plays into this bigger picture. Not that I think that the mayor necessarily needs to be in charge. If he wants to, that's great. You know, but you know, that to me, that's part of the question. But as an assembly, I don't see how we can be. So that just leaves me with that void of really trying to figure out who's really responsible, who's going to take charge, who's and the same question that we just had about who's kind of the point person for the bag changes. So that's kind of the way I feel about it too. Is we've got to figure out really who's responsible, and if we're not, then we need to be able to say that.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Thanks, Felix. I guess a question or comment to Cameron. When we were in the strategy session planning, you had explained a vision or spoke to a vision about moving the energy towards the coalition and making that a focus. And that's what you all, sorry, I came in a little bit late, are talking about here, right? Is shifting that energy to it. And so then I'm assuming you were also just discussing this piece down at the bottom.
We're actually we're not
yet
started.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Chris.
So, in all of this concept, it is important the coalition takes lead. There is one way, though, that you and I and everyone who is elected can't avoid the perception of having a duty. And that is the fact that our neighbors, when they have a problem in these lines, they call us and they expect us to respond, right? And so there's a separate important duty that we have outside of what the coalition is doing, even outside of what the administration is doing. That is, what's our approach to this? Because believe me, if I just said, call the coalition every time I got a call on homelessness in the downtown district, I would be sent out of downtown on a rail to Eel River probably, and don't go back. Because these issues my neighbors deal with every single day. And there's that line between, and where that confusion probably comes from, is that we have to respond to these demands, because these demands are real and germane in the lives of our community and how we've organized these systems around us. And so all of this was created. It's not just an abstract phenomenon that appeared. So this is policy after policy, year after year. We have a duty as well to the constituencies to say, this is what we're doing. So there's a balance in there between saying simply, talk to the coalition, or this is the one plank we're working on, and us in our weird, unique roles as the access to government for our constituents.
Thanks. All right. Suzanne, did you have something?
Well,
Because I do need to move on.
Okay, sorry. No, I just wanted to say, you probably get, a lot as you're the midtown folks. I get some, and I try to respond to everybody on those. And I think even, with shifting energy to the coalition doesn't mean we don't advocate and help our constituents find answers. That's what I feel like is our primary role. We may not have the answers, but we try to help people get where they need.
Thank you. All right, so since John is back, we are going to go ahead and get started with the conversation around sanctioned encampments. Meg, do you want to get this kicked off?
Sure. As we discussed at the last Rules Committee meeting, I had suggested the idea of referring the issue of sanctioned encampments to several commissions with some questions. The questions were sent out. I got some great feedback actually from Crystal, and I'd actually like to suggest that we stop saying sanctioned encampments and say permitted encampments. I like that terminology. I liked Crystal's rationale, which is, a permitted camp or permitted camping is something we already know about. We have that out at Centennial. So not to say that that's a location, it's just to say that that terminology is something, it also pulls some of the charge maybe out of the term. But I didn't get any other feedback except my own feedback to myself because I kept thinking about this, so I'll provide that, is to make sure that we definitely, well, and actually I've had a little bit of feedback from Mr. Weddleton, and the two things I'm thinking about are some of these referral questions may not fit the commissions as well, although there definitely are health implications and public safety implications and planning and zoning implications, but they may not take the question as something in their purview. So my thought is to potentially break this into two parts. Start with part one, which is the HAND Commission, the HRAC, the Youth Task Force, which are really already ones dealing with homelessness. Have them evaluate the idea of permitted camps within the current plan or continuum of care, which is anchored home. If folks think we should do public safety and health as well, and then see when we get that information back if we need to be a bit more expansive. Because we might also have a bit more refinement at that point as well, especially if we're asking folks to consider something that's maybe a little bit further outside of their normal day-to-day business on a committee. So that's where it's at so far.
Thank you. Any initial thoughts from the members? Yeah, Chris.
One, probably on top of the questions, I guess there is a bit of a preamble there. As we move this process forward, I think it's important for the protection of any individual member that we come up with a position of either a committee or of the body that says we want answers to these questions in a certain way. Because the perception has been that one person is going out and doing all this and doesn't know what they're doing, and it's an unfair burden for an individual to take on if this is an area we are interested in exploring. So we should own it or not, but we certainly shouldn't leave one person hanging out there. And so I think that's an important thing for us to contemplate. And the second is, I'm not saying much in all this because I have very visceral opposition to this concept. And I may be wrong, but I just know what's going to happen is these will all be in the downtown. And I know that may not be reality anymore, but I'm PTSD conditioned to the fact that this is just what's going to happen every time. And I'm terrified of that for my neighbors because they already own this problem for most of the city. And so when it comes to getting questions and responses, I'm doing my best not to shade the process with my negativity. And so that's why you aren't hearing much on the content side.
Thank you. And I think, and Meg, correct me if I'm wrong, but the process here is going to be to ask the various committees that might have interactions with these commissions to refer them off. So I think that's where the home of the work will happen for those particular questions.
For those particular issues, yes. So if there's public safety concerns, I think Public Safety Committee should probably take those up unless they really, the concerns, when the information comes back, seem like they are more appropriately diverted to the Committee on Homelessness. I think that's for those committee chairs to make that determination. But I know public health or the health committee has been asked to look at some issues that are possibly tangential to homelessness and around camping as it occurs. So I want to let each committee make its own call there.
Yeah, Pete.
Thank you. And I think when this new group hires their coordinator or whatever they're going to call it, we should make sure that person comes to the homelessness committee on a monthly basis to make a report, so that we're kept in the loop as much as possible. Thank you.
Good idea. Thank you. Yeah, John.
I don't know, a couple thoughts on this, but one is, why not just have the homeless committee be the conduit? I mean, if you split it up into 3 other committees, then you get all disjointed. It's 3 people, groups going 3 different directions. I mean, homeless, and if someone's getting picked on, you can say, on behalf of the homeless group, are you chair, as co-chair. I mean, that seems a natural thing, and it's not really beautiful. I think a broad thing, having been on a couple, is that okay?
Go ahead, and then I think Cameron wants to talk.
No, please, I just want to get in the queue.
Okay. Having been on a couple of these commissions, so I'm just kind of okay, so this comes to us. You know, what form? What is the question? Hey, what do you think about having sanctioned permitted homeless camps in Anchorage? It's like, what would they do with it? I mean, initially, of course, the view is what we see downtown at Brother Francis. No, we don't want this anywhere. And, you know, you're pulling from this initial starting point of negativity to where, and then what do they do with it? Well, okay, well, they put it on their agenda, well, they have some public hearing thing. You have all these people pro and go, talked about all this variety of things, and I don't know what they would do with it. So it's really how we present it. And I think one thing is we need to have, what are we thinking initially? What would be, you know, kind of clamp the pole somewhere different? And I think have pictures of Dignity Village, and maybe get, and I'll commit to doing this. I'll call Portland and see, how do you zone this? What is your procedure? But I think they're largely hands-off, and we'll learn that. And actually had a UAA student do a kind of literature review on these, and I don't have the report. Never gave it to me, and I emailed him, haven't got it. But you know, he had across the country kind of a review, and he says, well, you know, when they get over, I forget what number, it was like 60 or something, you started sliding into anarchy, and there was a sweet spot at 50 to 60, which is what Dignity Village is at. You know, so there was but I think we need a 2 or 3 page introduction to any group we send this to, and just so the vision is not what I think we all have in Anchorage. You know, but I think this is, you know, we should respect our commissions, take advantage of them as we move forward. Definitely have them part of the conversation. But if it's too early, I think one will push them away. They'll have a bad experience and they're done, and we won't really get the input that we're looking for.
Thank you, John. Cameron?
Yeah, I guess I just reflect on, again, I go back to that comment that comes about what our role is in all of this. And so, you know, obviously there would be some policy-related work that would need to have happen if this were to move forward. There potentially would be some funding in some way. You know, so that makes sense. But it seems to me the decision of whether it's the right direction or not, or, you know, it is a larger sort of community-based conversation. So this is a perfect example to me of a role of a coalition, of a coming together, not only to get public input, but to bring, you know, mental health providers and homeless service providers and, you know, I mean, all the different people that this is going to involve in some way, and to have a thoughtful conversation about whether this is the right direction or not. And so it feels like we might be going down that same. I know Meg has been trying to say, let's have other bodies, you know, address this. But that's what I guess I would encourage us to do, is to not have this be, you know, we have to decide whether this is the right direction or not. I don't know. I'm not sure this body is equipped to make that decision. And so I would encourage us to engage that broader coalition and to have them involved in the conversation as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris?
Thanks. You know, interesting, just the opposite side of that coin, though, is that we have to make the decision about what we are responsible for, right? Ultimately, we do have to get to that point, which is part of this conversation, and that we can be informed by any number of stakeholders, committee process, coalition, but we ultimately, for our resources and our direction, have to make that decision. So we have to do our homework too. I think that the purpose of reaching out to those other committees, you know, John, I understand what you're saying by let it be run by the homeless committee, but the problem is that's 2 people chairing and doing a ton of work, whereas if we spread it out to a number of committees and lead by those people, we broaden the base of individuals, of membership who own a part of the conversation. And so maybe somewhere between the two concepts, having the leadership of the homeless committee and having some committee structure work on it is the path between those two things. And I just would reiterate what you said is, I think, similar to what I said, the 2 to 3 page summary of the question, what are we actually asking? If we put our brand on that, our stamp, then it relieves the burden from an individual owning this, and it becomes our question. So I think that's the same thing I'm proposing. Let's flesh this out to the point where what we hand outward, we get back targeted answers instead of any possible answer under the sun.
Thank you, Chris. Meg?
Thanks. Yes, and I kind of had asked for that information to flesh it out, so again, a new ask. Particularly if you have links or resources you want to provide. If you have successes that you've seen happen in other locations, I think that's all very valuable information so that we can kind of bring that together and frame the questions. To Cameron's point about the coalition, I did check in with the coalition at least about this a little bit. They did give me some resources, particularly to make sure those with lived experience were going to have a voice. I think once we have our issue framed, we can work with the coalition about the best way to push it out to their membership and broader to also get that feedback as well. As co-chairs of the Committee on Homelessness, we would probably take that information and be responsible for it. Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I think that's a good way to get at making sure we have broad stakeholder input so that, I mean, I look at this as getting to the issues of public health and safety, which is our lane when it comes to homelessness, so that we can make sure we do get a broad perspective, and then we can take the information back and determine, do we spend more time on this or not? Is anyone interested in advancing policy?
Can I just respond to that really quick?
Sure.
And just say that I think that the shift that I'd like to see happen, and I realize that we have a responsibility and that it's different from others, but when it comes to who decides whether we should go down this path or not, right? And that I think the people in this room believe it's our decision. We get to decide whether it's going to happen or not. And I think that we have a role in that decision. I think we have a responsibility in that decision. But I think that the shifting the perspective that it's really not our sole choice whether that happens or not. There are other leaders, there are other people in the community that should be involved in that decision. And so that's the shift that I would love to see. Is that because we're going to be elected or not elected, our term is going to end. The community is going to continue to move forward. People that are involved in this have been involved in it for decades. And so when we sit in a room by ourselves and try to research as much as we can, but when we do this in isolation and say, feel like ultimately it's our choice, it's our responsibility to decide whether this moves forward or not, I think then we continue to perpetuate the problems that we're in now. And that's why I would love for this and other topics to be moved into that sort of more community-based conversation, a coalition, but that coalition actually be empowered in many ways to have a voice in these kinds of things. That's beyond just give us the information we want and then let us sit in a room and decide. And I realize that there are legal obligations we have, and there's a variety of things that we have that really we have to own. But I would just love to see that shift. Thanks.
Thank you.
May I provide a clarifying point? Just this is all about on public lands as well. Okay, I want to make sure that that's clear. I'm not talking about what may happen on private lands. So I think that that's just want to make that really clear.
If I might, both of our especially thank you.
Yeah, I do have folks in the queue. I'll add you to the bottom. Pete.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, it seems like that the homelessness problem in several instances falls under the purview of different committees. Sometimes it's the health committee, sometimes it's the public safety committee, and obviously always the homeless committee. And here we are on the rules committee talking about it. So I think it's difficult to put it all on the shoulders of one committee or another, because different problems are going to fall on the agendas of other committees, and so unfortunately, I think that's just the way it is, the reality of the situation.
Thanks, Pete. John?
A couple of things, just to, I guess, review my perception of it. It addresses a little bit of what Cameron was saying. I mean, I think you're right, and I look at my one on-the-ground experience with Dignity Village, which has been there 19 years, and it's kind of on the fringes of Portland. But basically, the city said, okay, we'll give you this land, $1 a year or something, similar to what we do in Queens, right? It's just a super cheap lease of land. And then they are Dignity Village Inc., okay? And they set all their long list of rules. No drugs, no alcohol, no violence, pay $40 a month, and work for 10 hours a week, you know? And that's it. And they are self-governing, and they kick people out who don't follow those rules. And it's been 19 years, so it can happen. Now, this isn't for everybody. And they have people who won't go there because of all those rules, okay? So, but it's for that segment that can handle that. And it's very hands-off from government. They say, well, some service providers do come by now. Not over the span of 19 years. It's relatively new that these people come by just to get to know the people living there. What we've heard pushback from the administration on this idea is, no, this is stupid because it costs just as much as building a hotel or building a structure for them. Well, that's probably true if you require that it's not tents, it's not sheds that have only a heater, no place to cook, but you require this, if you raise the standards, and if you say, and they have to have case management and so on, you could certainly ratchet up the requirements on this and make it a dumb idea because you might as well build a Marriott hotel for them. Or you can say, we have an example here, very hands-off, that has worked for 19 years for a segment of that society. And most of the people there are 2 to 3 years, and they get their life together and move on. Some are longer. The executive committee can stay longer to give that continuity, you know, for this thing. So, yeah, we have an example that works. It's just minimal, and it's very light touch from the government.
Thank you. Crystal.
Thank you. You know, it seems like we keep going around about this whole role and responsibility question too, but I think that's what leads me to believe that, you know, it is a bigger community question, so we need that fuller community engagement, and not just different organizations, but just individual people. I mean, these are taxpayer issues as well, and you know, for the most part, that's who we're hearing from. Those are the people that are emailing us because they, you know, what are my taxes paying for? Is the question, and of course, you can't really give them a good answer. Because to a certain extent, there's so many different funding sources. It's not just somebody's taxes that are paying this. But one of the reasons that I brought up the idea of permitting camps versus sanctioned camps is, and I know Meg said that she's really talking about public lands, but I think there's a role for private landowners in this as well. And there are people who have come up with ideas about, hey, I could set up this camp, you know, and when you think about that, if you allow somebody to do that, they can start to build whatever infrastructure might be needed. So it does become, as far as policymakers, it becomes a land use decision on our part. But at the same time, we can kind of shift some of the liability, and you know, and I don't say that that's, you know, trying to just be totally hands off, but to a certain extent, if somebody decides to turn this into their business, then they're going to have to do the infrastructure type things or the liability type things. But there are people who believe that this could be a profitable venture for them. And, you know, not even though a lot of people are homeless, they're not penniless necessarily. So they're not going to be rich by any standard, or they probably wouldn't be homeless. But my point is, there's a lot of people that kind of need to be in the conversation here when we talk specifically about this idea of permitted camping, or you know, whatever you want to call it. It's broader than just public entities or public land or different various charity organizations. So.
Thank you. Chris?
Yes, Crystal, you hit on a critical point there. Sorry, Cameron is gone, but one of our key jobs in all of this is the zoning question. It's the land use. And what happened last week and 10 days ago was an offshoot group of camp here broke off. They wanted to be a recovery village. They came and talked to us. And so they set up on the apartment building that two of them live at. And all of a sudden, in a residential neighborhood, people were, first they set up on a lot that's for sale. Then they realized they couldn't be there because there was a realtor involved. They moved in behind the property owned by, or leased by, some of their advocates. And so then for 10 days, there were people walking to that vacant lot and pooping and peeing, and there were definitely what appeared to be drug deals going on by the neighbors. Probably weren't drug deals because these people definitely are saying they're sober, but they believed they had a right to be there. So then they found the landlord, and the landlord had to go to their management company, and then finally we got resolution, and probably they could have stayed there through an entire code enforcement action, but the owners feared $300 a day penalty. So what that all points to is that we have a huge role in this conversation. We have to decide, 6 votes have to decide that question, or that series of questions. It's not that the coalition and all of its partners decide this is what's best, and then you do what we tell you. We actually have a very important part of this conversation, and that is yes or no, green or red, and that's our job.
Thank you, Chris. Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm actually glad Dee is here because Ms. Kennedy brought up liability, and so my question is, if we allow a permitted camp on community property and something happens to someone there, or they freeze to death or whatever, does the community have liability because we've permitted that?
We can set up a different regime, but in general, there's going to be some type of liability. But then we look at insurance. There already are court cases on that very issue. And someone put someone in charge of a camp, and that person ended up drunk, and this person got shot. So we already have those cases in the state of Alaska. But it's something you have to deal with to set it up, how to minimize that. Whether there's a model where, like John's talking about, where you can really delegate, different ways of trying to delegate that liability.
But we're self-insured.
Right.
So,
right. So are there ways to do what John's talking about with that one particular camp is, where maybe you deed the property over to a different entity, or so I think those can be managed. So just where liability should stop.
So it's actually how we set it up legally, we could reduce our liability.
Yes, and I'm saying I'm hoping that. I don't see why not. There's got to be a way to deal with these different roadblocks.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks, Pete. So before I go to Suzanne, I just want to be mindful of time in that we could really spend hours and hours and hours on a lot of these specific questions, and they're all good questions. But that's not necessarily the purpose for today, is to dive into all of these specific questions. It's to figure out how we want to move forward with the process, right? So, Suzanne.
Okay, thanks, Lewis. And I'm not sure if my comments are relevant, but I want to say thank you to Meg for structuring this conversation, because I think it's one that we really need to have, and that it may lend itself to some findings that will help further the conversation with constituents who keep coming forward with these different ideas, and it may point to other options too. But my question, I guess, is about the relationship with the coalition, and my assumption has been that you and Cameron as co-chairs meet, and that there would be some coordination at some point, some sharing of information, because we want to take into account everything when we're considering what policy to set. But could you speak to the relationship? And I'm sorry, you may have already spoke to that.
No, that's fine. So we will soon be on the coalition's board, and they're certainly great partners. They're great, I think with the municipality assembly, great partners, and we're all working together. And they certainly provide feedback and input. The reason this all says commissions is because the assembly has a particular role with commissions to push out for information. We could certainly do something similar, particularly with the coalition, but it'd be just an ask. But I think that exchange of information has always been rather free and candid, which I think is important. And I think the coalition is really a conduit for us if we want input from folks with lived experience as well, which I think is an important voice to make sure that we get in this conversation, and they are one of the primary conduits for that.
Thanks. I really love this approach. I think it's great to engage our commissions, and I'm really, very curious to hear their feedback. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Last
Thanks.
question, if I might.
I have John. John.
I actually have 2 questions. Oh, here's one. No, I got that. Okay. What in kind of Crystal's point is the Dignity Village concept, which has been so successful. They actually now allow churches to do up to 6 units or whatever, these little sheds or whatever, on their property. So it really becomes a land use thing. And it's been to the negative for Dignity Village because now churches aren't building nicer sheds for them. They're doing it on their own with their churches.
Thanks, John. Chris.
Just what's our plan then for capturing an overview statement, that 2-page summary that goes with all of this process, so that we can commit to this? Is there a resolution that needs to be drafted and introduced and voted on? What's our path forward that does that? Because I don't want this then to be another 2 weeks of waiting for input for these questions, and then again, flame wars come to the one person foolish, brave enough to step forward in front of this. And so, what's our plan? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks. That's where we're going to get to next. So, do you want to start on that, Meg?
So I've come up with the questions. My personal preference was to really ask this at the 50,000 foot view, but I'm hearing that that's not tenable. So if anyone wants to jump in to try to start to put a frame around this, I am open and game. I'm willing to help with that process and help get feedback on that frame. And if it needs, I don't know in terms of the formal process, if it needs to be in terms of a resolution or not. I did check with Dean in terms of referrals to the commissions, and those can go from a committee co-chairs directly to the commissions.
So I guess in that instance, I wrote it down to start thinking about the framing of the question. So I'm open working with you. And if anyone wants to join us, feel free. Okay, so any other questions about process? So sounds like we're gonna work on a larger frame of the questions, and then I don't necessarily know if any editing has to happen of these questions per se. I think they're fine. Then it's asking the co-chairs of the committees to refer them to the commissions.
One last question on that. So we're asking these questions of our commissions. Might we also just send them out generally to the public, let people respond to them? Here's some questions we want answers to. What are your thoughts? And in that way, we also provide to those who might say, these people don't know what they're doing, a chance for us to say, well, we asked you too.
Through FCC or something.
So,
Yeah, FCC, that's interesting.
And I'm happy to send out to the email lister for our committee, which is very active, and then anyone else who obviously would want to disseminate it further.
Might be open up Pandora's box if we do that. Just throwing that out there.
Well, I think
It's not open.
I think the box has already been opened.
Collectively, I think the box is open.
Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Wonderful discussion. So let's go ahead and take 5 minutes, and then.
Dee had a comment.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I would also say it should be forwarded this to the administration. They have incredible resources. And the whole time I'm sitting here going, geez, they have all these resources on the P4. I sit in all the Pay for Success meetings. I'm drafting agreements left and right on that. That's going to roll out at some point. Huge resources. And why aren't we able, or you able to directly tap into those resources? And when they have these Pay for Success sort of stakeholder meetings, it's every who's who in the social welfare world in Anchorage, and all the big philanthropists, all the service providers, all the hospitals. We have these resources. Why aren't you able to actively address them?
And that is a really great question. And I can tell you what, it's an incredible phenomenon to try and then have it explode in your face and turn into you're attacking and you're doing all these things. And so it would be great to have that sense of collaboration. But a lot of this is in response to a failure to be able to tap into those conversations, either because there's not the resources, there's not the time, there's not the will, there's not the interest. And so this is a reaction, I think. And I work with them well, they're a lot.
I guess I'll just put a finer point on it. So the reason that the Assembly is having this conversation is that the administration has refused to have this conversation.
About encampments or?
Yeah,
like-
about this generally.
Well, it's procedural too, it's broad. The implications span a number of areas. We didn't hear, because of reality, until 3 days before the money had to be put on the table for a contract. We're killing people now because we needed 3 more days to ask the questions.
Okay. Can I just say, maybe, I understand that the administration's focus, I presume, is on supportive housing. That is their thing right now. But maybe as your liaison to your board member, I can find some of those resources. I can't believe we don't have all this information. What John's talking about, the different types of camps, all sorts of information at our fingertips.
We would love for you to be our
I would be
advocate to the
yeah.
administration.
The grassroots are getting restless.
And I would encourage John to try to get that information about the other cities and what they've done that might have been successful, because there's no use of us trying to recreate the wheel if they've got methods that have been proven successful.
Absolutely. John?
He made my point. Because they have just
So we're going to take 5 minutes in a second. We're going to come back and we're going to spend the rest of our time. So please push back on me when I suggest that we only spend 2.5 hours meeting on something, because it obviously takes 3.5 hours. So we're going to come back and we're going to work on our goals. I'll frame it when we get back. 5 minutes.
Wanted to keep it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to run. I may call in.
You're running?
Out of the office.
Oh,
Back
out
to
of
the
the
office.
office.
From one fire pit into the next. Out of the frying pan into the fire. Something along those lines.
I think this is really great, because we're finally getting to a point where we are having to have these policies.
So I'm just thinking, right?
Yeah,
If it's been
no,
something that's on my left permit, specific meeting. Okay.
Talking about
That means a lot of work, right? We don't have, but
putting
we can
the
define.
administration who should have been here to consult.
I can only imagine. These are our friends.
I used to get to the assembly meetings at about 4:15, just to see what they were going to lay on the table, and try to get together with other members when they came in
Yeah,
to see
no,
what
I
we
don't
could
want
do to try
planning and
to.
zoning to hand it to
Because,
staff.
I mean,
That's all they're
Sullivan's last year, and he,
Get a majority.
and we had just taken the majority when I was elected, and all of a sudden, he was desperate.
With consultation.
Because he was relatively certain that I had no chance of winning, and so he was surprised.
So, but David did it.
Yeah, it's we're training up in case they turn.
And I'd like to identify any plans that might be referenced that they should refer to, because, and I'm not the expert in this potential plan we have. Well, maybe look at the language. Maybe look at the language and talk about it.
So you guys recruiting on the back door? They might want nothing.
Well, they could say our joint rate it doesn't give a space that would allow for.
That's good to know. So it's
valid.
what land use categories. That's kind of gets in there for now. So I'll look at this. Right, actually, Jade is going to work. Maybe I'll never do that.
You say Jacob?
Jade is.
Okay.
So that was December. But I would sit down and look at it.
Okay.
Capstone or something. But it turns out I never got a file. Christmas happened, then he went to Pearl.
Well, and I have Mackenzie Pope working for me. She's really familiar with where to dig stuff up.
And he just did.
Well, and I'm happy to use my staff to make some phone calls kind of where they need to know.
So, you have to have some sort of leadership organization.
Who would know? Hey Jane, it's John Weddleton, 317. And we are sitting here actively talking about sanctions and homeless camps. And we'd love to get the information that you have put together. We call
I'm gonna have, I'll work with Felix on the frame and maybe we can, have something fairly complete in 2 weeks' time. I think we need to have some stuff, I wanted to give the commissions adequate time, 60 to 90 days, which maybe we adequate, but if we get it back to traffic this year, if anyone wants to move policy before next summer. Because I don't know, I mean, there may be no update, we took that appetite for it.
It's gonna brag.
Yeah, I just like the letters from the co-chairs saying, hey, you know, Dean gave me the ordinance provision, we have this ability to refer to, our subject matter experts. Please write it. Thank you.
Well, I understand.
This is great. Well, they also, I heard that there's somewhere 30 senators that do both. You go on the record, it's a different
Good, thanks.
That's how we ended up with, somebody did substitute your own judgment.
I like it. There were more. You're right. Take care.
that's interesting. This is still a law.
The thing was that the body made a decision for the plan. Fine. We didn't justify it. It's not the growth. I was worried they were going to charge you 10 cents per bag of the popcorn at the movie. I don't know, I brought my
Boy, that's actually. That's like.
But it couldn't be taken out.
It's the sensitive thing that you put it correctly.
Guys, we don't have time here.
I was getting complaints from people, I wouldn't even show it, and I got a coach, I had to see Caroline. That's why I told my sister, I said, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're doing we want to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah, so.
Hey, Dave, if you look at the market, or you see that yields going forward, you see the last spot, the straight Alaska and the rest, most of the western states have, including some states. But that's going on, because the film one, you've got to do it, get a decision from the Supreme Court reversed. But these cities are suffering. I think the freeze were due by Wednesday, and Alaska was in there, I'm really tough. I wouldn't see Alaska.
What else are we waiting for? John's still here.
But I'd like to see.
Chris leaves.
Chris didn't leave, yeah. He has to go back to the real world.
Yeah.
Would you look at the old emails and say, we traded MSN on common studies? That way I don't have to. MSN.com. Appreciate that. Because it depends on the Supreme Court rules on it. It could be, it may take them a long time. You see all the pain that's happening in Western states. It doesn't matter what city, all uncertain, they're all bleeding. Everyone knows how it's not applying to the eastern states.
Well, I think that Lucas Steve actually mentions Virginia case, that cites with
We're going to talk about goals here in a second.
And then Marley's response will be next month. The response. The boys were provided.
Then the decision about. You ever have one of your sons who's in university? Josh and Sean?
I work in the office.
Your parents will insist.
It's a really fun
Sorry, Suzanne, we're gonna get started. Yep. All right. So for the remainder of the time that we have, we're gonna go through as much of the goals as we possibly can. So I just have 4 of the 5 here. I still don't have the comms goal done, and that's mainly because I really want to wait until the working group has had a chance to flesh the goal out in a similar fashion as the other ones. Then from there, I can take that work that Meg and Chris are doing and turn it into what we have before us. So today, I'd like to get thoughts on the 4 completed goals, and then after today, assuming we go through all of them or as much of them as we can, I'll give this over to my staff to format and finalize. But I think we're getting close to that finalization point. So, for each of them, and we're going to start with homelessness, since that's been the topic today. And I'll lay out the format for all of these, so they're all formatted the same way. So the first few paragraphs all are about history, what the Assembly has done, what the community has done. Then from there, we go to talking about some of the specific ideas that have come up during our deliberations. We articulate a goal. We articulate a series of questions that we'd like to explore further. Then we articulate what our role is in the process, which that's come up a lot, right? What is our role? Then we delve into some short-term and long-term goals that we have in each of these areas. We talk about the partners that we hope to work with in each of these areas. And then we end with talking about how we will be accountable to the public in each of these areas. So that's how I want us to look at these. So I'll start off with the history piece, and then I'll just go piece by piece in these and see if anyone has any thoughts. So the history piece for homelessness is the first 2 paragraphs. Does anyone have any thoughts on those 2 paragraphs? Anything that's obviously missing? And I'll frame this by saying the intent of this isn't to have a complete and detailed history of what's been done on homelessness, because that would take way too long. But this is just to give sort of the overarching points of what we've done and what the community has been engaged in. All right. I'm just going to keep moving on, so stop me if you need to. Then the 3rd paragraph details the discussion around the idea. So that's the first meeting that we had on this, was what are some of the ideas that we have? Then the second meeting that we had during this entire process was goals. So this next paragraph after that addresses our goal, and I think that's an important one for everyone to review and see if they have any gut feelings about that particular paragraph.
Paragraph 3.
That is 1, 2, 3, 4. The goal of the Assembly is
Slow down,
clear. I did send this to everyone last week. Yeah.
I was just wondering if we should kind of change it there at the end that would more mimic what we have in the Anchored Home Plan, which is making homelessness brief, one time, whatever those key words are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what you're trying to get at.
Okay.
That's my suggestion.
Got it. And did you have something, Suzanne?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, John?
I'm sorry I was out of the room. This is what?
So these are the goals that we've been working on, and so we held those series of facilitated meetings some months ago about that, and so this is the culmination of all of those meetings and into a narrative. And so right now we're just going through specifically homelessness and seeing if there's any specific thoughts on the narrative.
Can I make a broad comment?
Sure.
And not this bad, I would reorganize it because I'm saying the average person, I say, we're kind of involved with policies and we're thinking of this format.
Uh-huh.
The average person, oh yeah. So I got these people in my backyard, fires, toilet and all that business. And what do the assembly do? Oh, it's a problem. Oh, they made a committee. Oh, and then a plan. Oh, and it's their number one issue. They haven't done anything. I think that's the response. And I would flip this a bit. This paragraph 4, we make a statement. Okay, let's start off. We're clear. We must do these things. Okay, now I'm here. You're responding to my issue. And then number 2 is saying, well, our role is really public policy. And to me, that kind of frames. That's why we make a committee and make a plan. But I deal with the issue right up front. Your number 1 has the most punch, and that's going to pull people in. Okay, because that's what I want: reduce homelessness and the impact. I may even say our community, your neighborhood, or your home, or just really talk to those people who are emailing us and walking around and don't email us, but we know it's painful for them. All across, it's painful for the homeless, it's painful for the neighbors in these camps. But that's your punchline right there. I put it right in the front, and then you're the one that starts with the assembly and committee. Move that up, and then go into this long.
Okay, so just to be clear, the 4th paragraph, your suggestion is to move that up?
Yeah, I'd make that number 1. That's a kind of a grabby, rhetorically grabby, and it gets to the core thing.
Okay.
We're with you on this. We understand this is a very, very serious problem.
Is this about goals anyway? So let's start off with that conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
So, Felix, who exactly is the intended audience? I mean, is this for us primarily as...
I would say no. It's not
Okay.
primarily. I mean, sure, we're going to use this as a guide and to help us, but I think the intended audience is for the public to
Okay.
understand what we are doing. Because how many times a day do you get that question?
Sure.
What the heck are you doing?
Sure. Well, then I guess I would argue if it's going to be like more of a public relations piece, then not that you have to choose between public relations and substantive documents, then yeah, I mean, we might want to do more of what John is saying, but I wouldn't want to lose also some of the other stuff.
Well, I don't think John was suggesting
I
you
know,
lose.
no, I know that. I know you're not. But I can think of other ways too that we can enhance, the public relations piece of it with whether it's photographs or what. Okay, just wanted that clarification. Thanks.
Through the chair, I think that we have some really talented staff in the clerk's office, and I think you have some other resources as well. I think the plastic bag ban fact sheet, the cell phone fact sheet, some of the other things that we've done in elections demonstrate that. Jennifer also has a background in media, so I think we've upped the ante here. And the one thing that I'll tell you, you get the content that you want, and we'll let these talented people put it in a format that it'll go out to the public. And as John and Crystal and Meg know, it's lots of iterations before the final is approved. So we'll help you with that.
All right. Okay, so far I have putting the goal up top, brief one-time event. Moving on then to the questions. And again, all of this, just in case you're wondering where the heck did Felix get this is all from those conversations that we had. So anything in those questions that looks fishy or something that we need to add? Okay.
I would just suggest that number 2 question, I think that's getting to the heart of what Cameron's been talking about.
Uh-huh.
That he may have a suggestion there about maybe
more toward, instead of accountability, but shifting the focus from government into the community or the coalition. I don't know exactly what his suggestion would be, but that sounds similar to what he's been saying to us.
Okay. Got it. All right. Then the next paragraph talks about the role, and I'll just read it since it's short. To convene, lead on public policy, leverage local, state, and federal funding. I think that's simple. Yeah, John.
You may not have heard this at the things. I think I went to those.
You did, yeah.
But this first one, what are the barriers to transitioning those experienced homeless or from being illegal encampments to some form of housing? I would like to make our goal far, be housing as used to go 20 years ago, independent life.
Independent living.
I don't want to provide anyone with free house. I want them to have a job, pay them for their own. I mean, that's where we need to go. And let's hold that as the goal. But so often, and I think because of the funding and all this, and we know roof over their head is really needed to get them independent.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm there, but that's not really the goal. The goal is over there, independent. They're paying their own way.
Okay. Thank you.
Housing first is just the first step.
There you go.
Probably where we're now, step 4. First, they have to go through a sanction.
All right. Next two pieces. Short-term and long-term goals. I think some are thinking, but you can talk if you want to talk.
If this is an outreach piece, okay, increase funding for public relations to educate our community members. I don't know that's as well even with me, but many people know. Put it directly on the problem. I mean, we need to get word out better. But if we only have 4 things here. One is hire a media consultant. It's kind of like, let's pay a doctor for 5 hours. It's something, So to me, that's kind of weak one. Maybe increase funding, get the funding part out. I mean, the point really is we need to increase education of the public.
And how do we do that, John?
Or maybe better coordinate efforts to educate community members, better coordinate efforts among stakeholders or the coalition and the municipality to educate community members, because I think that's really the crux, is that we have lots of different communication strategies happening, or no communication strategy made to coordinate that.
Okay.
I understand we need funding, but I'm just saying that in my district, they don't spend a dime on this stuff. It's a urban English problem. I don't know what Ocean View and Bayshore, Southport thing. They don't think it's their problem either.
Well,
okay.
I don't know if we necessarily need funding for public relations. We have amazingly talented people in the clerk's office that can put information out on social media that won't cost us anything. Is that correct? I mean,
so it's the amount of resources it takes, though, to put out accurate information on this subject, it's enormous.
okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I would not want to ask our clerk to take the lead on that.
Thank you.
And really, that's us anyway. I mean, we're the ones that come in contact with the community, and they're the ones that email us in some form or fashion. And so we need the information.
Yeah, unless you're going to clone me 10 times. I don't know if we can do that. I mean, yes, I agree, we need the information. But I think there needs to be a broadcast way for us to communicate to the public.
I would offer that there is an effort through the coalition and with the administration, at least, and Cameron and I are involved, to coordinate that communication and get out what you're hoping to get here from public relations, that they've got, I think they secured some funding from Rasmussen to do this. So I think that this is in the works to do. I don't have any better wording to give you at the moment, but
Yeah, no,
but
I'll
it's
definitely.
there.
I'll definitely change that wording so to reduce get the funding piece out, which I know money. Yeah, John.
It was a relatively small amount, like $25,000 to Nancy
It was.
Burr. I'd be interested in maybe the homeless meeting. What is that money going towards? Make sure
It was to
addressed.
Robin, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and this is separate. This is something different. This isn't money coming through. This is the coalition doing that. We're partners with the coalition.
But what was it? We funded some money for.
Yeah, it was $25,000 grant from Rasmussen to Robin on education efforts or outreach efforts or something to that degree.
I'd like to see what they're doing.
Robin Ward?
Yeah, Robin Ward. Yeah, we can see what they're doing with that. Yeah.
And just, I had a little bit of a conversation with Dee Ennis before she left too, in regards to the potential for us to have our own web pages off of our assembly member links that we would manage ourselves. We'd have to, be able to manage it. But the point is, you would have access to whatever links we had to give people this information. You just put it on your web page, and then people could go check it out themselves. So you don't have to answer every single question. You just direct people to where the information is. So that's probably worth developing too, just so that we do have a little bit better of a connection with the public. Plus, we have a place to send them. Because I do get tired sometimes of saying the same thing in the next email. Trying to answer the almost the same question.
Right.
But anyway, it would be good to have the ability to provide links to a lot of these different sources of information.
Agreed. Okay. Any other thoughts on the short-term or long-term goals? Yeah, John.
I really like this ways community members can engage, because when we get an email from somebody that says, tell me what I can do, I want to help. Oh, we got this. No, we don't want helpers. You can't. Liability and all this. People tell you we want to help. You say thank you. You draw them in. I don't know how to do that now. But people who are operating will say, no, we got it. We don't got it. We need all that we can. It blows my mind. You can say no.
Yeah, stuff like this.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Yeah, I think that's a good addition. All right, seeing no other thoughts on the short term or long term, then I have that one edit there. Then list of partners. Obviously, I don't want this to. We can probably make this be a 2-page long list, but I think this is a good snapshot. If you have any edits, yeah, John.
Sorry, I'm still behind. Maybe you have it in here somewhere, but I think there's agreement on. We will have a constant problem until we deal with mental health and substance abuse treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And everything else, housing, everything's a patchwork. And
So it's
that's somewhere way
in the long-term
top,
goals.
This, I'd make it high above the thing too. We're dealing with this peace bill. Everything will be at the top. 30 sentences, but maybe somehow highlight that that is not a piece of the puzzle. That is like, we will continually deal with this until that's dealt with.
So your suggestion is to loop that into the narrative somehow early
or
on.
Put it in bold and stars and little
Well,
Okay.
Goldie.
Got it. There we go. Crystal.
one way to maybe put that to a different level would be identify solutions. We don't need to just consider them. We need to find out who's got it. And again, it's about connecting the dots and making connections. Yeah. So.
Okay. All right. Okay, so then moving on then to the partners. Does that paragraph look okay? Yeah.
What about, would you call them the health community, hospitals, clinics, doctors, medical community?
Okay, sure. We can put in health providers.
Which one are you on?
So we are on the partners, which is the paragraph after long-term goals. And so Pete's suggestion was to add health providers in there. That's a good one. Yeah.
The other thing I might, instead of using the word insure, because you can't insure anything, maybe you just use the word engage or implement. Something that's more of an action. We're going to engage in a holistic approach. Anyway,
Sure.
just a thought.
don't want to be making promises we can't keep. John.
On this list of partners, state of Alaska, they've not been a good partner, but they hope they will be.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, then those last two pieces here talk about accountability, because that was a really important part to our discussions. We can do all the goal refinement possible, but if we're not have ways that we're accountable, then it's not going to be as useful. So any thoughts on those last two pieces? Yeah.
I think someone had said it. What's that? Make it rare, short term, something. So you have reduce the number. That's good, but also maybe add when it happens, make it short. But maybe those goals should be here. Rare, short term. Would that fit in here? Your accountability. I guess you want to see stats.
Yeah, and I guess if we were to do that, we would do something like reduction in the number of people who come back into homelessness.
Yeah.
Hi, what do you need? Okay.
There's a lady dancing outside the window. You're doing a great job, Felix.
I think maybe she had just done too much vaping.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So on the part about accountability and measures, as far as like saying where our starting point, did we talk about that in our strategy session? Like, how do we gauge our starting point in terms of, or measure our starting point, public perception? We can count the number of forums. I'm not sure if we talked about, how we count the number of people involved, or did we talk about that? I can't remember. Yeah, are you gonna?
Sorry, can you reframe that again?
Oh, sure. Just on the accountability and measures.
Yes.
Just even like looking at our starting point.
Sure.
How will we quantify the current public perception so that we are able to measure how we improve? I think we can count the number of public forums that we have, and also to the number of people involved in addressing homelessness, since they do bleed into other areas.
Yeah, and I think the number of people involved, I think, gets to, are we adequately engaging the community? So are we seeing more people engaging in the system and volunteering and helping out with the system? Change in public perception. I mean, I don't think there is a public perception poll out there that says, here's what people think about homelessness. So we'd have to figure out a way to gauge that.
Well, seems to me the number of people involved just increased on Wednesday when we had the big announcement.
Yep.
So.
Well, they were all looking for more. I mean, everybody.
They're committed now.
Sorry, I'm jumping in, but I love the idea, and then going back to John's point about, plugging people in, citizens who, want to help, and you mentioned that too, Crystal. I mean, that would be, I think, a really interesting metric to be able to measure, the number of citizens engaged. I mean, obviously, it kind of, if you're dealing with food insecurity or other areas of support, it kind of blurs. But
Volunteerism in the program or something.
yeah.
Crystal.
Felix, did we talk at all about the idea of kind of reducing the negative impacts to the community, whether that be the private sector or just public using public spaces? Or we didn't really talk about how some of these efforts would actually help to reduce negative impacts.
So part of that is in public safety when we're talking about ensuring consistent use and safety of our public spaces. I don't think we explicitly talk about mitigating impacts on private property. I don't think that's anything that we explicitly talk about.
Well, just thinking of it in terms of accountability and measures, something that we could probably measure is the fact that you got fewer complaints on your email, or 911 had fewer calls. I don't know. Anyway, I'll throw it out there, but
Okay. Fewer camp reporting. If they track how many are reported, that would be
I'm not sure that's a great metric. I don't think we want to, unless there are just fewer camps.
I mean, I think there's already fewer camp reportings due to frustration with the system. So I think that's a double-edged metric we have to be very careful with.
How do you interpret that? That's a good point.
But how much resources do we want to put into counting? You know, I mean, you wear yourself out counting. It doesn't really get you any closer to the goal line, you know?
Well, but some of it's available just in the reports we already get.
Yeah, I can imagine something like the 911 calls. I don't know if they have those split out into calls specifically for homelessness. I don't know if they do. John?
Like moving back to the short-term goals, and get that in, but minimize negative impacts on neighborhoods. That should be right up there with everything else. Kind of
True. That's part of the big picture.
I don't know if that's a specific enough goal, though.
Is there anything in the scorecard goals from Anchored Home that would inform this accountability and measures under Pillar 3? Because there are certainly accountability measures for public health and safety. I don't know if we could glean some of those that might fit our role specifically.
Yeah, I can look at that.
Because those are already being reported on as well. The metrics are being kept, and we just might better monitor them or be more engaged with those.
number of camps abated. I mean, that's what you're saying, right? Those numbers are right there.
Yeah, but that's a whack-a-mole situation. They abate one here and it pops up over there. You know.
How many have we, you know, that's still a valuable thing. But
Well, and as it relates to Anchored Home, it's how they're abated and whether or not, I mean, it's a bit more of a nuanced goal in that scorecard. So it's not just the pure numbers that we report, it's kind of the effectiveness of that process.
There's gotta be some validity to it somewhere.
you know, what we say we do 800 this year, and next year 400. So we'll go positive. Next year 300. 7 years down the road, 2.
That means something, right?
That means something there. I mean, 800 to 750, probably not much.
Could mean the funding's been cut too, and we're not.
Yeah, you could, but if you get down to 2, which is that possible? I think so.
At that point,
We have to have that hope. Where
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I have several suggestions for additions in the measures. Looking at the scorecard for Anchored Home for additional metrics. Any other thoughts? The rest of the pages here are just notes from the meeting that we had. So any other thoughts on these first 2 pages?
Well done putting this together. I mean, we
That
had
was a lot of work.
some pretty wide-ranging animated conversations, so thanks, Felix, for doing this.
Thank you. We got 3 more.
See if I could.
I don't know.
Is
Sure.
Because we all get these, like I have a file and I have, so I can cut and paste my answers and modify them slightly. Everyone does it, speed it up.
Mhm.
But one of them had Nancy sent something that's about a year old that did outline things they had done that very parallels a lot of this. That it's part of this. Actually, it was a letter she wrote that did that, but it's got some of this already. So I'll email you that.
Okay, sure.
But what I've been doing is my boilerplate response plus also see this. It's getting some data because it's a year old. But you know, most people, you're doing nothing. And they know we're doing nothing, but every time they drive through town, they see the same beggars on those corners. We're doing nothing. And if we had no one living in their parks, none of that, they wouldn't know. If there's beggars on the corner, that's their visual. So when you can say, well, no, here's the problem. What's bigger than that? Right? Here's what we're doing. And promise them we know it's not enough.
Yep, absolutely. All right, yeah, I'll look forward to that email, John. Okay, so we don't have time to really go through the rest of these. We will try to find time to go through these 3 and get your edit. So really my goal is to try to get a final version of this done by the end of October, because we've been spending a lot of time on this, and I've been spending a lot of time on this. So I'm going to see if we can maybe find time to meet in the next couple of Fridays. Definitely not next Friday unless you guys want to meet like at 8:30. So meet the next couple of Fridays to finish these 3. Hopefully by then the communications you'll be able to have met. Meg, you think?
We don't meet again until November due to scheduling. I believe it's November 9th-ish. No, not the 9th, but it's around that time. So we'll meet again then.
Okay.
But I think we've done a really good job of identifying, and we could probably work quickly after that meeting to create a similar format here to do that.
Okay.
And if I may,
Yeah.
I brought this has been passed around at the community council meetings, and I'm going to bring it to the communications pillar, but this is ASD's kind of comm card, communication card they've been. So I just want to make sure everyone's seen it, and if you have any particular feedback or thoughts about its effectiveness, let us know, because I'm going to be bringing it up in our November meeting.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, so you guys all have copies of these other 3. Please review them, write your notes, so that when we come back, whatever scheduled meeting that we have, we can really go through these quickly. All right, with that, any other last thoughts, comments? I do have to open it up for audience participation. Eugene. I didn't forget. Okay, seeing no other thoughts, then I'll go ahead and open it up for audience participation. Go ahead.
My name is Eugene Carl Haven. I represent myself. I live in Matthew Valley. I follow public process. When the public process is an appropriate decision made by the governing body is like the public interest. On one of the pages that you were reviewing, I noted the words, quote, "We must ensure the public is confident in our efforts and trust the public process moving forward. Our accountability to the public is of utmost importance." Quote, end of quote. That's what I'm reading here, and I'm sure that you went through so far. But bringing back to this meeting, I'm not questioning the meeting talking about homelessness. Not at all. But the public's in the dark. You talking about homelessness in this meeting? Because the agenda for this meeting, which is a substantial part of the agenda, was dealing with homelessness, and it's a critical issue that the committee is concerned about, and you are concerned about. I'm sure that they would like to have been here, but as a member of the public for the discussion of homelessness, who in the public is here? This is, you see when you title the meeting homelessness meetings or committee on homelessness or whatever, you see a great number of people here when you hold your meetings. You also have the assembly chambers. But the fact is, when you do these agendas, when you put the paperwork out at the start of the meeting or just before the start of the meeting, the public doesn't know and have any clue what you're going to do. And the first meeting from 10 to 2, I'm not questioning the need of hearing, and you call the continuing education title. Is that going to be your new thing now, continuing education, and then we're going to find out who's here, that 2 parties are going to speak, city attorney spoke on X subject, and then the municipal league representative spoke on Y subject. I'm not questioning their right to address you at all. But I'm concerned, continue to be concerned, of you all following the policy of keeping the public in dark, including yourself, of what you're going to be doing at the next meeting, with all due respect. And then we see that leaves 51 seconds. I'll just end with this little blurb. Look forward to seeing you all at the Borough Assembly meeting, Acre Assembly meeting. That's later this week. Remind you, I don't think that one's going to be canceled.
Okay.
That's it. With about 50 seconds to spare.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to participate in our meeting? Oh, Dick.
If you don't mind, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
He's not the only member of the public. Of course, he's from a different public, isn't he? From Matt Steele, if I remember correctly. Dick, I need to talk to you for a few minutes on something I heard this morning from Perez. First of all, you guys set policy. If you don't know that, read the city charter. The mayor doesn't set policy, you do. And if you don't want to do it, then resign, we'll find somebody that will. But for me to hear the assembly members say we want to spread out who has responsibility, the charter doesn't work that way. You do. With 6 votes, you can pass it. If the mayor's not compliant, you can try 8 votes. The mayor then will be compliant. You guys, mayor doesn't set policy for the city. You do. And I know you're only paid part-time for what is a full-time job. I understand that. Moving on to homelessness. The court case that deals with us not being able to clean up the parks was Martin v. Boise, and that's being appealed to the Supreme Court. 9 states appealed it. Cities have. Has the administration asked you guys if you want to appeal that or not?
No.
You need, I think Dee didn't know about it, did you, Dee? You need to look at what Alaska's appealing, because that affects all of us. This Ninth Circuit ruling is killing the western states. The mayor of Los Angeles has asked the governor of California to declare an emergency because they've got 60,000 homeless living in LA. San Francisco now, or Seattle, one of the two, is now putting rocks in their pathways to stop you from sleeping on them. They put big boulders in the sidewalk to stop you from sleeping there. It's affecting every western state. So I think this is going to the Supreme Court, then we'll see how they rule. But this ruling in Martin v. Boise is just killing us. Because we can't get them out of the public right-of-ways, and the public's asking you, why aren't you doing anything about it? And I know you're trying, but with that court ruling, it stops what you can do. And with that, I will shut up.
Thank you, Dick.
Anyway, sorry to bother you guys.
No problem. Would anyone else like to participate? All right, seeing no one, meeting adjourned. Thank you.